present, and emerging. So over the past few months here at Moir Group, we've been doing many webinars and informal Zoom discussions, and they've been really, really popular. This is the first of our big webinars, and I believe is on the most important topic in these times. So today we're going to be talking around care, resilience, and our own mental well-being. When I was just thinking about the introduction for today, I sort of wanted to reflect back on, I suppose, the history with Moir Group. I started the company in 2007, almost exactly 13 years ago. It was the beginning of June, and it was just before the GFC. And you know, if you think about the times we're in currently, I do feel there are some similarities. And what I learned 13 years ago, I feel is very relevant to today. I learned how important it is to care about others, and often that's doing the little things really, really well. And care is actually one of our 5 values here at Moir Group. So care in terms of maybe actively listening, keeping in touch with people and things like that. And I think many of the strongest relationships that we now have as a business go back to those early days. So when I look ahead to what is coming, I feel this ability to care and to show genuine empathy for others is going to be really, really important. And I think that we all have a responsibility to do this. At Moir Group, we understand how uncertain these times are, and we're always here. So if any of you would like to contact us at any time, we're very happy to listen and just be that person you can contact. Today's webinar will run till 1:30 p.m. and there will be 2 poll questions, and we have the option to do question and answers throughout. So please type your questions into the comment box for Graeme to answer. And also we're going to do a formal Q&A at the end. And at the end also, I'm very happy if you have any broader questions around the market, things like that, very happy to answer those as well. Now to introduce Graeme Cowan. So Graeme, thank you very much for being here today. Graeme is a leadership, resilience and team mental health speaker, and he's dedicated to helping individuals live healthy, productive and meaningful lives. And he's going to speak about building a caring, resilient and inspired team. So over to you, Graeme.
Thanks very much, Stephen, and lovely to join you all. We've got a really great crowd here today, and I think it just really reflects that this is an important, a very important topic for all of us. And so as Stephen mentioned, just a little bit about me and my background, you know, I worked in senior leadership and funnily enough, in a previous crash, actually it was a tech crash, I crashed and burned myself. I was a vice president for A.T. Kearney, a global management consulting firm. And I crashed and burned. And basically I wrote a series of books in the Back from the Brink range. And it was sharing stories of people who'd been through tough times and bounced back. And through those books, I also got to meet Gavin Larkin back in 2009. And work with him and a small team to launch Are You OK? And I'm still a board director of that, and it's wonderful to see the progress there. You'll notice those 3 words that I talk about under my name, care, resilience and growth. And most of us say that we want to have, you know, resilience and growth is the outcome we're looking for. But I really believe that at the core of it is care, and particularly self-care. And one thing that I hope you take away from today is that self-care isn't selfish. If we get self-care right, it can lead to resilience. If we get that right, it can lead to growth. And that, as you'll see later on, hopefully is really seeing that flows on to teams as well. So as Stephen mentioned, we've had a very, very challenging period. My 90-year-old father has said he's never seen profound change like this. He can't believe that the pubs are closed. Even in World War II, the pubs weren't closed. So I thought, Stephen and I thought what we'd do is to ask a poll question. And Jessica, who's on the Moir team, is going to launch that. And if you wouldn't mind just answering that when you can. We've got a few people, yeah, it's gone up. We can't vote, but if you could just put in, what's the biggest challenge facing you? It will just help both myself and Stephen know what's going on. And I'll just count down for 15 seconds to make sure everyone has a chance to fulfill it, because I think it's really important that we understand what's your major issue? This is an anonymous vote, so please answer as you would if you're just by yourself. So give 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And Jess, if you could just close the poll and then share the results, please. Well, there we go. The biggest issue has been the loss of income, and that's not surprising given what's happened. Trying to balance work and home life. I so relate to that. My wife is working from home, and she says she wants to go back to the office to have some work-life balance because she does a lot of work overseas. And finally, pivoting as a business. So the top 3 are loss of income, trying to balance work and home life, and pivoting the business. And that's the tough thing, isn't it? Isolation also deals quite well there as well. So if you could just close the poll now, thanks. Excellent. Thanks, Jessica. So we're going to be talking today about caring teams, and caring teams lead to resilient and inspired teams. And we've all been through quite a few things before. The fact that you're a Moir candidate or client probably means that you've been through at least one market downturn. And I think we can learn from when we've been in great teams in the past. We're going to have a Q&A about some of the general principles there, talking about what resilient teams do and how their mindset and also what they do, what action they take. Then we're going to be talking about red zone care because, as you may have seen, statistics from Beyond Blue and Lifeline show that there's been a rise in depression and anxiety with this whole crisis. And so I'm going to be just pointing out some ways that we can support our teammate. That's the red zone care. And then finally have some Q&A. And as Stephen said, if there's questions that we haven't come to at 12:30, we will finish by 1:30. But if there's other questions, I'm quite happy to stay on a bit longer if necessary. So I was involved, as I mentioned, I met Gavin Larkin back in 2009. And as you may have known, Gavin was the founder and tragically died from cancer in 2011. But this scene in front of you is at Woolloomooloo. It's the HMAS Adelaide, Australia's largest frigate. And I know we've got, I think Doug on the line's an ex-serviceman, so he'd probably relate to some of this. But we were asked to launch an Are You OK 365. These people, all of these people, 600 sailors, were about to go overseas for 3 months. And imagine that, we've been through change and being away from our loved ones, but imagine being away for that period of time. And we launched it, and what made it quite extraordinary was 2 people that spoke that day. And on the left is Gwen Churn, and she is a Are You OK ambassador and tragically lost her husband. He was a serviceman, to suicide. And as she talked, you'd hear a pin drop there because, it's obviously something that all these people could relate to. She talked about the signs that they missed. And she also talked about, what his mates missed as well. And then it was passed over to Commodore Stephen Hughes. And as in the movie Anchorman, Will Ferrell was kind of a big deal in the news business. Commodore Hughes oversees 19 ships and 4,700 personnel. So a very senior person there. When he comes on the ship, a whistle goes and everyone's on alert. It's quite extraordinary. But he just nailed his presentation. What he said was, you've heard Gwen's story. We don't want to lose anyone from the Navy family. But then he said, that should be enough for all of us to really embrace this concept of Are You OK? But I'd like to just suggest to you, even if you haven't been touched by it, and I really find it hard to believe that you don't know someone that's been through some mental health challenges, that this is also a capability issue, that the Navy is nothing more than hundreds of great teams. And if one person in that team is compromised, the team is compromised, and the whole ship is compromised. So that was the first thing he said. And then he said, and I'm just saying that he just said it right in the right language for this audience. And, everyone has to launch it according to their culture, their environment. But then he said, this is also a risk mitigation issue, that in the Navy, we want to take a enemy target out from 1,000 kilometres. much more so than from 10 kilometres, and certainly not from 1 kilometre. From 1 kilometre, you know, there is collateral damage. It's not great. So it is with mental health. And the earlier we catch it, the earlier we can turn things around. And so it was just a great expression from a really good leader on not just saying it's a humanity issue, but it's also capability and risk management. And then we went up on the deck and formed this amazing large Are You OK on the deck of the HMS Adelaide. And this was November last year. And I just really reflected, because it's been 10 years since we launched Are You OK in Canberra and Parliament House, and had gone from having, you know, no employees, very little money or income, to really creating something like this. And as I thought about it, I really thought this has really been an example of an amazing team that I've been part of. You know, Gavin had this vision that a conversation could change a life, a really compelling vision and purpose. And we all really bought into it. And even when he tragically died in 2011, it's just grown and grown and grown. And we've still got a lot more to do, but we're going to be expanding overseas. And when I thought about it, you know, this unique team had a great sense of purpose. We had complementary strengths. We had, we worked well and had each other's back, and we had to be able to share things. But what about you? What's been a great team that you've been part of? Now, it could have been your Year 9 netball team, or your footy team, or working at McDonald's, or this role or previous role. What was it, when you think about that particular team, what was it that made it really good? What was it that made it really good? And what I might ask you to do, just think of one word, 1 or 2 words, and write that word down, 1 or 2 words. And now I'd like people to just put into the Q&A what those 1 or 2 words were that made it really special, really unusual. So you just type in the 1 or 2 words that made that team special, made it stand out. Bond is one for Michelle. What else have we got? Cohesive is another one. Another cohesive, trust and respect. These are all fantastic. Respect, coherence, involvement, clear vision, fun, no idea killing. I love that. No idea killing. We had each other's back, supportive, and thank you very much. That's amazing. And you'll see that collaboration, trust, fun, diversity, trust, excellent. Just, you've really highlighted that you've experienced a great team. And I just want to share something now. Like we've come up with this list of what great team, fantastic, in literally 3 minutes. But about 5 years ago, Google set off to understand what made their best teams. And it was called Project Aristotle, and the results were published in the New York Times. And they looked at 180 teams around the world, looked at 250 separate factors. And at first they thought it was going to be individual, you know, who were the individuals in the team? But it actually wasn't that. It was actually what they call team norms. And these were the team norms that were nominated. Psychological safety, and I'll come back to that in a moment because that encompasses many of the things you talked about. Dependability means you can rely on each other. Structure and clarity means you have a clear idea of what's expected. Meaning is about purpose. We believe in the purpose of our organisation. And impact is knowing that our team makes an impact. But by far the most important was psychological safety. And what that is that team members feel safe to take risks and be vulnerable in front of each other. And I noticed one of the things shared in the previous chat session was no idea killing. And that's a perfect example of where there's psychological safety. People bounce off each other. I'm going to be building on this as we move forward, but this is really key because the other thing that was highlighted in the previous poll was pivoting your business. And we're trying to all pivot our business without having all the information. So being able to tap into the genius of the group is a really, really important element. So Professor Amy Edmondson is a professor of leadership at Harvard Business School, and she's probably one of the foremost experts in the world around team psychological safety. And you can see the things there where there's interpersonal respect, mutual respect, trust, being themselves. People are comfortable being themselves, and they usually have fun together as well. So when you see that, you think, well, everyone's so polite. We're all just being nice to each other. Do we get stuff done? Do we really get stuff done? And this is where she further elaborated on this. And if you really do like some of the elements around psychological safety and performance pressure, this is one of her models. And I think it's really good because it shows that you can have high psychological safety and high performance pressure, and that's where you get the best results. And so when we have low psychological safety, low performance pressure, we're in the apathy zone. High psychological safety, low performance pressure, in the comfort zone. When we have high performance pressure and low psychological safety, we're in the anxiety zone. And in my experience, a lot of organizations in Australia are really going to this type of area. And that's why I really want to talk about the importance of how we promote this team psychological safety. But if we have both, if we have high performance pressure and high psychological safety, we're in the learning zone. And quite frankly, this is where we need to be right now. We need to try new things, see if it works. If it does, keep going. If it not, work something else again. So how do we build this team psychological safety and also the performance pressure? Well, I believe it comes down to a culture of care. And so if we think of all of us there as in that figure, the first thing we have to practice is self-care. And as I said at the start, self-care isn't selfish. Putting fuel in our own tank allows us to help other people. And ultimately, that's the best result for the organization. We're going to be also talking about crew care. And this is, how the crew works together to have equal emphasis on performance as well as care and well-being. And then the third element is red zone care. And that's about, being aware that some people might be struggling and having the skills to actually reach out, ask, are you okay, and guide them to the help they need. So if we get crew care and self-care right, we get growth. If we get crew care and red zone care right, we get resilience. And if we get red zone care and self-care right, we reduce risk. So, I know we've got a very heavy finance population here, but one thing Stephen's emphasized to me is that role is really changing, and it's much more, the technical skills are given, and the truly standout CFOs have great leadership and influence skills. And they would recognize that if we can reduce risk, increase resilience, increase growth, that's got to be a really good thing. I find this fascinating. I read a book called The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle, and culture comes from the Latin word cultus, which means to care. So culture actually means to care. And this has been around for a long time, but, probably one of the most rigorous engagement survey questions ever asked is this one by the Gallup organization. My supervisor or someone at work seems to care about me as a person. Now, Gallup has what they call a Q12, asks 12 questions, but this is the most predictive of higher profit, productivity, and customer service levels. They can show absolutely, having asked it over 13 million times in 135 countries, that if we can create that culture of care and have the self-care, crew care, and red zone care, it pays back. It really does. So I'm just going to touch briefly on self-care because most of the day is about, crew care and creating the right team. But what I want to really show is a couple of models. And this is a moodometer. I put this together after going through really, really bad depression, and my psychiatrist asked me to rate my mood. And one thing he said is that he felt that I should be able to manage my mood. And to be honest, I was a bit taken back by that. But he said, you've had episodes of depression before, you have a predisposition, but I believe that you and everyone else should be able to learn how to manage their mood. And it turns out that he was largely correct. there are three influences on our mood. Number one is our genetics, and that influences 50% of our mood. Number two is our intentional actions, and that's what we do each day, and we certainly can control that. And number three is the events that happen. So the great news about this is that, we do have a large 40% control over our mood. And Harvard Business Research tells us that if we are in the green zone, we're 31% more productive, 37% more influential, and 300% more creative. Really important qualities to have, because creativity and influence are really critical right now. And as a leader, for those that are leaders that lead a team, you can see there the benefit of a leader walking the talk. And the best way that they support a wellbeing program is to model it, to do it themselves. So this really reinforces that self-care isn't selfish, that if we take care of ourselves, it's very, very likely that our team follow our example and do the same thing. So we're just going to stop now to see if there's any questions, anything that's been covered on so far. So if there's anything you'd like answered, please just type it into the Q&A box on anything that's been covered so far. And if there's anything additional or anything else that you want to make comments on, please just type it in there. We'll only wait a couple of minutes. If there's nothing now, we will dismiss that and move on. But
so we've got a couple, Graeme.
Great.
So one question was, how do you increase psychological safety in an organisation? How do you teach that leadership amongst C-suite?
Excellent, excellent. I'm going to be covering that in quite a bit of detail, so I won't cover that right now. We will be covering that, so I'll come back to that.
Okay. And then another question was, if someone says that they're not okay, what's the next question that you need to ask them?
Excellent. Thank you for those questions, and I will be coming to them later in the presentation. So if it's okay, I will progress. I guarantee that we will answer those, because they're very, very critical. How do we build team psychological safety? So I will move on now. So talking about crew care, and this is, really about a team managing both care and performance. And I recently read this book, and I happened to attend a breakfast that Stephen and the Moir team put on in Sydney. And the breakfast was around inviting both chief HR officers as well as CFOs. And one of the questions posed by Doug, who's on here today, was, when does it work well? And how does it work well? And I just read this book, and it was just fascinating that when it worked well, this happened. So, the team members did feel connected, and I'm going to be talking about how we build that connection. They feel safe. And so what that means is that there's no idea killers. People are open to new ideas. They will try things. And then, do we have a shared future? Do we believe in the same vision as we did with the start of Are You OK? So that, I think is really, really critical. That connection, feeling safe, and having a shared future. And so for the person asking about how we build team psychological safety, I'm going to build on this now. This is, what I believe is a really good model to think about it. And so the first thing is, are we connected? Then it's, do we feel safe? And finally, do we have a shared future? So when we have that connection, we have a sense of belonging, there's inclusiveness. And many of those comments that you had previously really reinforced that there was trust and respect. People really believe that. When we have safety, we encourage. So there's no idea killers. We say yes and, not yes but. We really try to build and lift on people's ideas. We welcome diverse thoughts, diverse ideas. And when we have a shared future, we own it. So we're not victims to the COVID-19. We're trying to work out how we can best navigate our way through it. And I'm going to be picking up on each of those things, but I think it's just good to just think of those things. if we want to have a great team, we have to ask all the time, are we connected? Do we feel safe? Do we have a shared future? I want to share, so this isn't so much an example of, I guess, well, it's symptomatic, I guess, of having a weekly meeting that shares some of these principles. And this is one of my weekly rituals. I meet at Curl Beach, South Curl Beach, and they're my two mates in front of me, Bernie on the left and Alistair on the right. And we do a bit of the old man shuffle along the beach. And it was very, very big seas there last Sunday, I can tell you. But Bernie has a business, a new business, about 18 months old, and it's a cryptocurrency arbitrage business. Like, it just makes my head hurt to even think about this sort of thing. But Bernie has a diverse team. He's got about 15 people. About 10 of them are in the Philippines. And so he's been going now for about over 12 months, but also with the COVID-19 crisis, this has become even more important. So they have a daily stand-up meeting, and they literally have got it down to just being 10 minutes each day where everyone tunes in via Zoom. And they ask just 4 questions. Are you okay? And how's your mood? How's the family? How's everyone doing? And if there's not a satisfactory answer there, they don't move on, because they just feel that showing they care in that way is critical to people being engaged. Then the next thing they've added recently was, what are you grateful for? No matter how small it is, it's so easy to think about our lost income or having to pivot the business, but what are we grateful for? Some of us have had more time at home with our loved ones, for example. The second question is, what did you get done yesterday? So this is an opportunity for a virtual high five. It's a mini celebration. And if you're familiar with Therese Umberlay's book, who's written a book called The Progress Principle, she will tell you that the most energizing thing that can happen, the most creative thing that can happen, is recognizing colleagues' progress on meaningful work. So really important to recognize little steps taken the previous day. The third one is, what is your number one goal for today? And that should be about, the shared future. You're building a number one goal today, which will contribute to the shared future of the group. And then finally, are there any impediments to your number one goal? And I don't know about the people on here, but other groups I've spoken to have had trouble with internet coverage and, sometimes accessing the server on their organization, but they brainstorm together. So that's just an example of how they can, have that connection every day, have the safety. So the safety is when you ask for impediments. So you really share what you think could hold things up. And the shared future is talking about, what did you get done yesterday? What did you get done today? Which is about delivering our future. Now, I just want to talk about this connection side of things. And I think that this can happen in all sorts of ways. And there's, of course, in the office. And one of the most important things is little things that we do to almost connection celebrations. And that can be things like, sharing something great that happened on the weekend, or sharing something personal about yourself and asking other people to do that. Trying to go beyond the straight work. And, I've been part of the Moir Group, and they do this, and, they've had, various activities on their Zoom meetings, including loud shirts and party shirts. And it's just it's a way of feeling we belong, feeling we're part of a tribe. And so little things that can be incorporated into weekly meetings, but also interactions. Being connected means also welcoming new people, welcoming new ideas. So it's really important to think about that. And this research happened, as you can see, virtually exactly a year ago, which Are You OK did. And 23% of Australian employees said that they didn't feel connected with their colleagues, 23%. So it's almost 1 in 4. And so this is a big issue. If we want people to try new things, to help evolve a future, we have to encourage a culture where people are encouraged to take moderate risks. And this is from this same study, you can see that in 2019, only 62% felt that their unique skills and talents were recognised. And so part of being a connected team is knowing who's good at what. And Amy Edmondson says that really in great teams, this should be up around 90%, that 90% believe that the unique skills are recognised. And in this same pre-COVID event, we asked people what were the best ways to connect. And as you can see, they're not rocket science. You know, after work drinks, coffee runs to the local cafe, mini celebrations, morning tea, lunch out of the office. But just remember, these sound quite straightforward, but 23% say that none of those happen. None of those happen. So little ways to think about. Remember, you know, birthdays, celebrations, know people's name and how to pronounce their name. This also provides a feeling of belonging. Safety. Now, this is team psychological safety, and there are many ways about building. The question before was, how do you get an executive team to build team psychological safety? Well, one of the first things is to be able to be vulnerable with each other, you know, to be able to say, well, actually, I don't know the answer to that. You know, I think it could be this. What do you think? Being able to declare that we don't know all the answers together, because there's many, many situations like this. The situation is changing every day, and being able to be honest and frank is critical to moving forward. But the number one way that Google found which increased team psychological safety was that in the weekly meeting, every person, starting with the leader, shared a risk they'd taken the previous week. So we're not talking physical risk, we're talking psychological risk. So it could be, you know, reaching out to a department head where there'd been a bit of dysfunction between finance and operations, reaching out to a customer where there'd been an issue, trying to solve things, just taking a bit of a risk to sort this out. But it's trying new things. And the other important element is that about safety is that people have to feel that we've got each other's back. And again, from the Are You OK research, you can see that this isn't great. That, you know, we found that in 2019, only 28% of people felt it was safe to take a risk at work, down from 34% just 2 years earlier. So this happens in organizations when people do reach out, when they do look at different ways of doing things. You know, this also is not a great result where if you make a mistake, it's often held against you. You know, 43% agree with that. And so to build that psychological safety, you know, people lead by example, take risks. They can also be vulnerable. You know, for example, in this story in the New York Times about Google and how they discovered it, they talked about this super manager who had shared to his team, and they didn't know this, that he had cancer. And just sharing that vulnerability just took that team to another level. He was managing it okay, but he decided to share it just to be open and honest. And what I found in sharing my story is that it gives people permission to share their stories, and that's about building the safety. And finally, the shared future. And the shared future is having this sense of purpose, owning the future, and making little decisions along the way that help to get us there. And often they are day-to-day decisions that help take us there. And if you see this next slide, it's one I borrowed from a fellow speaker called David Dugan, but I really like it because it sort of plans out, you know, what could happen during this COVID-19. A lot of people think, well, we'll just stay the same and we'll float. But I think a more accurate thing is that we either decide, make little decisions each day to the best of our ability, or we sink. Staying the same means we sink, because we do have to, because I'm sure most people agree it won't be the same going back to work. Work won't return exactly how it was before. There's a great book by Harvard Business Review where they looked at the 3 laws of resilience, and they looked at the 15 top articles on resilience. And they put together a special booklet, about a 200-page booklet. But having gone through all of them, they identified 3 laws of resilience. And the first one is to, you know, confront our own reality, you know, really be brutal, work out and I'm sure you as finance people would be having to do this virtually every week. You know, what's our finances this week? What happens when, you know, the job keeper comes in? What happens with this modeling? What do we assume about customers? So at least having those things. The next one is to tap into meaning or purpose. So, you know, if our purpose, or my team purpose, is about helping leaders to build more caring and resilient teams who enjoy growing together. So what that meant for me was that, okay, I still want to do that. I can't do it live. Let's do it via webinars and other sorts of things to do things. And the next one is to then be resourceful. You know, think about different solutions, bounce it around off other people. Don't have idea killers there. Bounce it around, work out pros and cons of each, and then take action. So this is just revisiting Bernie's thing. And I think this is just a really, and even including this in a weekly meeting is good. Are you okay? You know, how are you going? What did you get done yesterday or last week? What's your number one goal for this week? What are your impediments? And it is about open and honest discussions, about working well together. If someone's in a bit of trouble, reaching out and all contributing to it. We're just got a few minutes to go before we finish and have Q&As. So people, please type in any questions that relate to what we've covered so far. But I want to talk now about red zone care. You might recall there was a previous example about, you know, you ask them, are they okay? They say no. And what do you do next? Well, I just want to share a model that I found really helps. So this is be a teammate, but it could also be a loved one, you know, someone that you're really close to. So this was surveying 4,064 people and asking them what worked best in bouncing back. And one of the first things is to identify. And in most situations, people are really grateful and relieved that you reach out to them. Not all the time, you know, because there's a lot of denial, there's a lot of stigma. But to identify someone, you're actually looking for changes in behavior, changes in mood, changes in tone of voice, changes in circumstances, life circumstances. So this forms the acronym I CARE. And so C is for compassion. It's putting yourself in their shoes. It's asking them, are you okay, with empathy. It's asking open-ended questions, trying to get them to talk further. The more they talk, the more they'll be likely to share what's really going on. You might have someone that, isn't as reliable, but you find out that, the reason they're not reliable, they're not sleeping well. The reason they're not sleeping well is that their son is become an ice addict. So they're chasing all over town trying to get them. And so getting reports in late versus the core problem of a son who's an ice addict, knowing that is really important. Next one is access experts. So this is encouraging them to see their GP, call a helpline, visit one of the websites to do a self-test, doing something along, or if you're in a large organization, calling the employee assistance program. The next one is revitalizing work. And so work is actually good for our recovery. A lot of people think, well, if they're really stressed, they should be at home. There is, COVID-19 aside, but there's lots and lots of research that shows that it's actually good for our recovery if we are connected with our workmates, if we are still in the work environment. We may need to cut back workload levels. You may need to ask them, is this something I can take off your hands? But overall, they're better off being at work than not being at work. And the final one is exercise. And this is just the knowledge that a 30-minute brisk walk improves our mood 2 hours later, 4 hours later, 12 hours later. So that's the I CARE framework. And this poster explains it here. And Jessica is going to email this out to people. And you might like just to keep it close by. When you have someone you want to help, this provides the guidance and the suggestions. And this is something else you might recall in my very first slide. I talked about also starting something called Factor C. And this was really piloting this whole area of e-learning. And, we've rolled out pilots and trials with Ernst & Young, with the University of Sydney, with Volkswagen, and we've just signed a partnership agreement with Aon around this. And so if you're interested in knowing any more about this specific thing, you can find it at wecare365.com.au. just a 20-minute course with resources there to help you support better people around you. And, you know, if you are interested in having a special webinar for your organization, it could be around self-care isn't selfish, how we build individual resilience. It could be around this one, which is really crew care, building care, resilience and growth in a team, and inspiration in a team. Or it might be around, you know, one specifically around the red zone. There's webinars that work in each of those areas. You can download that from my website, which is graemecowan.com.au. So coming back to this culture of care, I really hope that, you know, you go away just believing that self-care isn't selfish, that looking after ourselves allows us to look after other people. And if we do that, we do build resilience and ultimately growth. It's about making little decisions, making sure we're also part of this, you know, that we're connected, we feel safe, and we have a shared future. And that translates to we belong. You know, we're part of the one tribe. We work together. We encourage. So, you know, we don't kill ideas. We try to expand on ideas. We don't say we haven't got the budget. We say, well, we could do a pilot. We could try something. We could do it on a smaller scale. And the shared future means that we take responsibility. We decide each day, ultimately, what our decision is going to be. And this is what I call a Care Crew Credo, which a colleague of mine, Brendan Carter, and I put together. And it really summarises a team that embraces self-care, crew care, and red zone care. And some of the things I highlighted specifically for this COVID-19 period is, you know, without mental health, there is no health. You know, we honour diversity. We look after each other. We're passionate about helping each other. We always have each other's back. This was mentioned by one of you earlier on about what was part of your great team. And we ask, are you okay? We're really cognizant of that. And once again, Jessica will email that out to you following this. So as we think about, you know, where we are now, I hope that I've tried to convey that being caring promotes resilience and promotes inspiration. Being helpful means that we stay relevant for our future. You know, when we're helpful and useful, we're serving customers or teammates or employees. And then going for the growth zone is just deciding we're going to try new things. You know, we are much better when we're in that sort of growth zone. So that's the end of the formal presentation. We're now going to launch another poll. And it's just really asking you this question. So I'll ask Jessica to launch the poll now. And it'll be really interesting to see what, you know, what results or what options you think is most critical to you here. And it may be hard to just choose one, but I really hope that, you find that. So we just want one. We'll keep it open for another 5 seconds. And then we'll close. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Yeah. Isn't that interesting? One of the biggest concerns is going back to the old ways of working. And I think that, well, I'm not sure. I'd be interested to ask Stephen's opinion on that, but I think that probably reflects that we have experienced some very positive things about this environment. The fact that we can work remotely, have you know, tools like Zoom and Microsoft Teams and other things. What I think is also really quite fascinating is that the health concerns, catching the virus, is the next biggest one, and this is also consistent with a webinar I did last week where I asked a similar question, but it was an open-ended question. And then I put 116 answers or sentences into word cloud. And the biggest words were health and safety and catching the virus. So, you know, what this also shows, and, you know, I think Stephen could talk to this as well, is that, you know, there's not one size fits all in terms of people transitioning back to the office. There are the people that are probably quite fearful, and so it probably would make sense for many organisations to have different scenarios and different situations, because it doesn't mean it's all over. I'm not sure if you caught the news earlier today, but Waverley College in the eastern suburbs just had a student, found to have the virus, and so the whole school's gone home. That's a possibility that could happen to your organisation. Not wanting to be alarmist about it, but just, we have to also think about different scenarios. So thanks for that, Jessica. We'll close the poll and also bring in Stephen. So Stephen, did you have any questions on what's been covered far? Please type it into the Q&A. But Stephen, any comments on, some of those fears going back to the office or concerns?
Yeah, that's good. Graeme, can you hear me? Yep.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts seeing that and hearing what you've said, I think it's really interesting. I think that point there about going back to the old ways of working, I think that relates directly to what you've said in terms of people aspiring for more and therefore aspiring for that culture of care, to be connected, safe, shared future. Because I think we hear that a lot in terms of people we speak to all the time, and I wonder whether that's part of people's response there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, good one.
And I think the point about safety back in the office is a very valid one. It crops up in all the conversations we have in our discussion groups and things, and I think you'll see that very different going forward and a lot more flexibility than maybe is the case.
Yeah, and we also had discussions previously, Stephen, and you said that you were leading up to your people in terms of how they transition back to work, and you were changing how you viewed the office. And did you want to just add something about that?
Yeah, so we've, I think like a lot of companies, we've sent a questionnaire around to our team, and my view on this one is I'll be led by them. And I think the way we'll end up is the office will be there for people that decide they want to go back. So it's a decision on the individual. And for others, it may be more of a collaboration centre where we meet every so often and discuss things, that type of thing. And I think that's something I've heard quite a bit from others as well.
Fantastic. And so if anyone has any questions for either Stephen and I, can you please type them in?
Yeah, Graeme, so we've got quite a few that have come in. So I guess a couple of people asked if there's anything specific or different that they can do to support teams that are working remotely. Obviously, you don't have that face-to-face. So is there any sort of extra things that they could be doing to ensure that they're being supported?
Yeah, well, I've heard of different examples over this period of time. I've heard of, groups having bingo nights and this sort of thing, Trivial Pursuit nights. I've heard of people, having this sort of loud shirt sort of area. So that's all about, I guess, about connection. With regards to safety and looking out for them, I think it is just thinking about, specifically about the individuals, particularly if there's some who may be living by themselves. Some people are very comfortable in their own skins at home, but a lot of people are quite lonely, and many people have the office experience as being a really, really important element of their emotional life. It's who we spend a lot of time with, and I've heard many people talk about, just that it hasn't, that's something they've really missed, is that interaction, bumping into each other. And so, I guess some of the things you could do there is some one-on-one phone calls, and not even, sometimes Zoom, but I think we're often getting into a bit of Zoom overload. And I think phone calls are really helpful because you can just really listen to the voice and the tone and hear how they're going. And so I think that can be very helpful for remote teams. Did you have anything to add to that, Stephen?
Yeah, one other thing that I've started doing actually, and I've heard others do, is especially as restrictions are being lifted, and it won't be for everybody, but is actually going to somebody's house and going for a walk with them. So I've done that a few times, and that's a very nice thing to do. And I did it a couple of times last week, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think it's nice for everybody.
What a great idea! That's a real win-win. You get your exercise and your self-care, and as well as connecting. Well done. Well done.
Okay, so we've got another question. What tools or tactics do you recommend to encourage innovation and support psychological safety in a highly regulated and compliance-focused sector?
Yeah, well, I think the really big thing is to be focused on that it's psychological safety, not physical safety. So, and I know, I've done seminars at airports, for example, and seminars at building firms and seminars at engineering firms. And so, we're not talking about physical safety, but I guess it's just involving others in trying to sort out problems and solutions. And the best way to do it is for, people talk about what we might try. Let's brainstorm a few ideas. If you remember the 3 laws of resilience. So we accept what it is right now. Is there a legitimate problem? And let's be resourceful. What could be some answers to that problem? And while that's happening, really practice the not killing ideas. That idea killer was mentioned about great teams. So don't kill out ideas. Let the answers get out there. Let people add to the answers and say, yes, that's good. And if we did this as well, it could be better. But I'm not underplaying the the difficulty in being a highly regulated culture to then going really free floating like a Google or an IDEO or someone like that. But just taking little steps outside our comfort zone is, I think, a really key element.
Great. So someone else has asked, how do you deal with staff who do not respond to your actions?
Action, does that mean like a phone call or I'm not sure what they mean by actions. You're reaching out to people and they're not responding. I guess the only thing that I would, if that is what they're talking about, the only thing that I would suggest is trying different types of approaches. So, one could be a phone call, one could be an email, one could be a text, and just saying, you've tried a couple of times and just a bit concerned, just really value having a chance to see how they're going. Call it out and just saying, we're here for you, want to support you. I think that's what they mean by ignoring actions.
So another question, how do you identify organisations that have caring culture at its core? How do you identify them when you are outside the organisation?
It generally comes through in their customer service. You might recall that if you do have that culture of care where a supervisor cares about me as a person, they've been shown to have really high levels of customer service. And so, for example, I was involved right in the early days with Ramsay Healthcare. And at that stage, Ramsay Healthcare only had a very, very relatively small business. I think it was about 10 hospitals. This is about 15, 20 years ago. And I helped facilitate a process where we derived what they came to be known as Ramsay Way. And you can Google and see what Ramsay Way is, but it stands for people caring for people. And doing those focus groups is really interesting because they're trying to capture Paul Ramsay and the unique approach he took. And what everyone talked about, and I think this is always really interesting when you are researching cultures, what people say about the culture that are part of it. They just said how when he was with you, he was 100% with you. You felt like you were the only person in the room, and the results speak for themselves. That they have embraced that care culture. They do have very, very good customer service levels. They have very low injury rates, much lower than comparable organisations. They're now about 140,000 people. So yeah, and it's like Richard Branson says, if you take care of your employees, they'll take care of the customers. So generally where you see there's good customer service levels, you'll find there's a good culture of care inside the organisation.
Yeah, I might jump in there as well, Graeme, because I feel very strongly about this one. I think because a lot of people we meet in pre-COVID times, the main reason they were looking for a move in their career is because they're not aligned to the culture of the business or they don't get on with their boss. It's actually nothing to do with the role. So when you're looking at what's next in terms of a career move, being able to do your due diligence around the people and the leadership, and again, that sense of care is, I think, critical.
Absolutely.
The best way to do that is to talk to people that maybe have worked for that organization and can tell you a little bit about some of the leaders in that business. And again, I get a lot of people calling me just for advice around that, and I'm always happy to help people on that because it's really it's so important. And I think looking forward into the environment we're going to go into post all this, I think it's going to be more important than ever. And that sense of care, and you talked a lot about purpose, but those two things really, really key. And for companies that are very strong around those areas, I think they'll thrive, because that's where people want to be, and quite rightly.
Great. And as you know, Stephen, I was in recruiting before, and I always, you go into a reception and you'd see, the values on the wall, and next week you'd have someone from that same organisation telling you what it was really like being there. And it's one thing to have it on the wall; it's one thing to live and breathe it. And when you do speak with people that have worked in it, that's where you have a great idea of what if that spirit of care does exist.
Yeah.
Great. So going back to this idea of the not being idea killers, someone has asked, how do you practically help people not be idea killers? So people might say, I haven't got time for all these wild ideas. And, so how do you kind of manage that?
It's a very important question, because psychological safety can be killed with one comment. It can be killed with one withering look. And I really hope that many, many more people realize this is going to be a critical success factor for organizations to flourish. They are going to have to try new things, do new things. And increasingly, there's this book that I mentioned before, The Culture Code. Give a copy of that to every person on the leadership team, because it talks about really high performing organizations. And I'm talking about, Disney and Pixar and Google and IDEO and the Navy SEALs and, elite restaurants in New York City, restaurant chains. And they do really embrace those three things, around connection and safety and involving their people in the future. And it's tough if you have one that has someone that that thinks that way. But I think it's also reasonable to say that, I don't think we should be responding to ideas like this, that, there's a time for analysing ideas, but let's get the best ideas on the table and then go through and work out what's realistic, what isn't realistic, sort of thing. Do you have anything to add to that, Stephen?
No, I think that's summarised well, Graeme. I agree with you. Okay.
Okay. Sorry, we've got a couple more. Just see how we're going for time. Okay. Yep. Probably got some time for a couple more. So somebody has asked. It's interesting that physical distancing has allowed many workmates to become emotionally closer. How do we maintain that when it's a bit more confronting being face to face?
It's a really good question. I think that's when that answer came up, we don't want to go back to the old way of work. I think that's what people are alluding to, that it's not just how we work in terms of, where we work, but also how we work. And I would agree that, there's been lots and lots of interactions. People have a bit of Zoom fatigue, but it has been a really, really regular occurrence. And I think it's really recognising that deliberately saying and talking to the group, how can we stay better connected? How can we be safer about sharing ideas, about being vulnerable? Asking the group to come up with ideas. The idea of the leader being the font of all knowledge is really very flawed now. It really is. There's great ideas that exist. Just in this culture code example, there's one thing which I thought was amazing. And it was Larry Page from Google in the very early days of Google. And he was going through all the ads that came up from the searches. And he just wrote, "These ads suck." And he put it up on a kitchen cupboard over the weekend. So one guy saw that, spent the whole weekend working on it, and came back with a plan. And it wasn't even his specific area, but it's turned out to be the absolute goldmine of the whole organization, their ad sales. So, great ideas come from the most surprising areas.
That's good. Okay, I might jump in there, Jess, I think, given the time. Are we good with that?
Yep, that's fine.
So just like to bring things to a close. Firstly, I'd like to thank Graeme very, very much for speaking today and sharing his thoughts. As always, it was fantastic, Graeme. I love the idea, this no idea killer, really. I think that's a good one. And also that culture of care and just self-care, crew care and zone care. I think there's lots for all of us to take away from each one of those areas. And thanks so much. It's always very inspiring. Typically, when we do these events, some of you would have come to some of our events in the past where we do them face-to-face, and I always like to give the speaker a book. So we're very passionate about books here at Moir Group, and I know Graeme's very passionate about books. So you will be getting this one, Graeme, and I'm just going to say a word about it. So it's called The Future We Choose, Surviving the Climate Crisis. It's a book I'm reading at the moment, and it is excellent. And it is excellent because I think it shows us a way that as a society we can deal with big issues. This is a big issue and how we've all come together, and the climate crisis is another one that we know we can solve that if we come together. So it shows us what we can all achieve if we work together, and it also outlines the world we must create in what we can all do now. So I highly recommend that. After this, when everybody logs off, there'll be a quick survey immediately after the event. This is to get your feedback, so please do fill that in for us. It would be really helpful, and it helps us to improve our webinars and future topics that we might be able to interest you in. So thanks again to everybody. Thanks to Graeme, and enjoy the rest of your day.